The docking bay doors refused to open. Principal Wrath pressed all four hands against the security panel, watching the flashing red symbols with growing irritation. 30 cycles of running the Academy of Advanced Species, and never once had the automated systems rejected a scan like this. Override accepted, the computer finally announced. Warning, unregistered biological signature detected. Scarnath DNA confirmed. Recommend immediate lockdown protocols. Rat's compound eyes widened. A Scarnath. Here, impossible. Those creatures existed only in forbidden military databases and nightmare scenarios used to train security forces. The insectoid principal's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of stress that students had learned to recognize over the years. The view screen flickered to life, showing docking bay 7. A small human vessel sat there, covered in scorch marks and what looked like hastily welded patches. Humans were not on the approved species list. The Galactic Consortium had deemed them too primitive, too violent, too unpredictable for institutions like this one. Then Wrath saw movement. A human male walked down the landing ramp with the casual confidence of someone arriving for a scheduled appointment. He wore simple clothing, carried a single bag over his shoulder, and moved like someone who had spent years in variable gravity. Nothing about him suggested danger or concern. What walked beside him made Wrath's breathing spiracles close in automatic fear response. The dragon was young by Scarnath standards, but still massive enough to tear through reinforced hull plating. Obsidian scales caught the station's artificial light, creating patterns that seemed to shift and flow. Wings folded against its body would span the entire docking bay if extended. Eyes like molten copper tracked everything with predator intelligence that made Wrath's instincts scream danger. Yet the creature followed the human like a devoted companion. No distrance, no control collar, no visible weapons or containment fields. Just a human and a dragon walking together as if this were the most natural thing in the galaxy. Security team to docking bay 7. Wrath commanded through the comm system. Full tactical deployment. Do not engage unless threatened. I repeat, do not engage. Wrath reached the main entrance just as automated defense drones surrounded the pair. The human stopped, raised both hands slowly in a gesture of peace. The dragon remained perfectly still, though its tail coiled protectively closer to the human's legs. My name is David Reed, the human said, his translator rendering the words in clear consortium standard. I'm here about the teaching position. Teaching position. The human said it like this was a normal interview, like he hadn't just arrived with a living weapon of mass destruction. Wrath's administrative mind automatically pulled up the job posting from 2 weeks ago. Interspecies cooperation instructor needed. 3 qualified candidates had already declined after reviewing the student roster. The Academy does not accept applications from unregistered species, Wrath said, keeping 2 hands visible while the other 2 worked the security override panel. And we certainly do not permit apex predators on campus. Ash isn't a predator, David replied. The dragon's head turned slightly at the name. Well, technically yes, but that's like saying water is wet. Factual, but not really the point. The drone's weapons charged with a high-pitched whine. Wrath watched the dragon's eyes track each one with mathematical precision. The creature could destroy them all in seconds if it chose. Every tactical simulation Wrath had ever studied said so. Yet it remained motionless, waiting. The point, David continued, is that I received a message saying you needed someone who understood how to teach different species to work together. That's what I do. By bringing a Scarnath to an educational facility, Wrath's voice carried disbelief across 3 different vocal chambers. By proving that understanding beats fear every single time. David lowered his hands slowly. Look, I know how this seems. Strange human shows up with a dragon, claims he's a teacher, expects to be taken seriously. But I didn't travel 6 weeks through jump space just to turn around. At least let me explain why I'm here. Wrath should have refused. Every protocol demanded immediate removal of both human and dragon. The consortium had strict rules about contamination risks, about maintaining standards, about keeping dangerous elements away from students. but something in the human's voice made Wrath hesitate. Not arrogance or desperation, just simple confidence born from experience. The same tone Wrath used when explaining complex administrative procedures to new faculty. Interview room 3, Wrath decided. You come alone. The creature stays in the docking bay under armed guard. David looked at the dragon. The dragon looked back. No words passed between them, but Wrath watched something transfer in that moment of eye contact. Understanding. Agreement. Trust. Ash will wait here, David said. But if your guards try anything, you'll find out exactly how protective he gets. The dragon settled onto its haunches, wings folding tighter. Its massive head lowered to rest on crossed forelegs, eyes half closing. To anyone else, it might have looked relaxed. Wrath saw the coiled tension in every muscle, the way those copper eyes tracked every movement within range. Follow me, Wrath said, turning toward the interior corridors. And human, understand that this interview is a courtesy. Nothing more. Courtesy's a good start, David replied, falling into step beside the principal. That's more than most species have given us. They walked through hallways designed for a dozen different environmental requirements. Temperature zones shifted every few meters. Atmospheric processors hummed, adjusting oxygen levels, humidity, and pressure. Students moved between classes, carefully maintaining species-appropriate distances that a group of Quilvan students pressed themselves against the wall as Wrath and David passed, their tentacles curling in automatic defensive posture. They had clearly heard about the arrival. News traveled fast in any school, regardless of how many light years from home. They're scared, David observed. They're sensible, Wrath corrected. Fear of legitimate threats is not weakness. It's survival. And when fear becomes the only way species interact with each other. David asked, "What do you call that?" Wrath didn't answer. The question felt too close to thoughts the principal had been having lately, watching students self-segregate despite every effort to encourage cooperation. Watching qualified candidates refuse positions because they couldn't imagine teaching certain species together. Interview room 3 was designed for Wrath's biology. Warm, humid, with orange spectrum lighting that made the insectoid principal's natural coloring more vibrant. David blinked against the shift, but didn't complain. "Sit," Wrath commanded, gesturing to the chair with one hand while the other 3 pulled up David's file on the holo display. Explain why a human with no formal credentials, no consortium recognition, and no apparent understanding of proper protocols believes he should teach at this academy. David sat, meeting Wrath's compound gaze without flinching. 3 years ago, I found an egg in a destroyed research facility. It was dying. Every civilized species would have destroyed it according to containment protocols. I spent 6 months saving it instead. When Ash hatched, I learned that sometimes the most important lessons have nothing to do with what's proper and everything to do with what's right. Wrath's mandibles clicked softly. Continue. David leaned back in the chair, his eyes distant like someone remembering details he wished he could forget. Wrath waited, all 4 hands folded in a posture that conveyed attention despite the principal's instinct to end this interview immediately. I was a salvage operator working the asteroid fields near the Broken Reach, David began. Not glamorous work. Most days involved cutting apart derelict ships for scrap metal and hoping the previous owners didn't leave behind anything explosive. 3 years ago, I got a contract for a research station that had gone dark 6 months prior. The holo display showed David's records. Salvage license, legitimate. Safety certifications, all current. No criminal history, no consortium violations. Unremarkable in every way except for the massive gap in his recent activity logs. The station was a mess, David continued. Hull breaches everywhere, life support completely dead, and signs of a fight that ended very badly for everyone involved. I was about to mark it as a total loss when my sensors picked up a faint energy signature in the lower labs. You went toward an unknown energy signature in a destroyed facility, Wrath said flatly. This demonstrates poor judgment. You're not wrong, David admitted. But salvage operators develop instincts about these things. The signature was biological, not mechanical. Something alive in a place where everything should have been dead for months. Wrath's breathing spiracles flexed. The egg, wrapped in emergency stasis fields that were failing. Whoever set them up knew they wouldn't last, but hoped someone would find it in time. David's jaw tightened. The research logs were still partially intact. A legal bioweapon project. They were trying to engineer Scarnath as controllable weapons. The egg was their first test subject, pumped full of genetic modifications and neural inhibitors. Then destruction was the correct response, Wrath said. Contaminated biological material from illegal weapons research falls under 17 different consortium regulations requiring immediate disposal. I read those regulations while trying to stabilize the egg, David replied. Every single one of them made perfect sense, logical, safe, the right choice according to every authority in the galaxy. He met Wrath's gaze directly, but I kept thinking about what that egg would become if I just followed the rules. A statistic in a report, another victim of someone else's cruelty, gone before ever having a chance to be anything at all. The holo display flickered as Wrath pulled up more data. Medical supplies purchased over 6 months. Atmospheric regulators. Genetic stabilizers that cost more than most salvage operators made in a year. The financial records painted a picture of someone who had sacrificed everything for a project with no guaranteed success. You bankrupted yourself, Wrath observed. I invested in possibility, David corrected. Every species in this galaxy started somewhere. Your people were probably considered primitive once. Mine definitely were. But someone, somewhere, decided we deserved a chance to prove ourselves. I gave Ash the same opportunity. Ash. Wrath's mandibles clicked. You named it. Him. And yes, because he's not in it. Not a weapon, not a test subject, not a threat to be managed. David's voice carried conviction that made Wrath's administrative certainty waver. When he hatched, I was terrified. All the data said Scarnath imprint on the first living thing they see, usually resulting in the death of that living thing. But Ash looked at me, and I swear I could see him trying to understand. Not hunting, not attacking. Just trying to figure out this weird universe he'd been born into. And it didn't kill you, Wrath said. Remarkable. He didn't kill me because I didn't treat him like a monster. I talked to him, fed him, kept him warm when his internal temperature regulation was still developing. Taught him that not everything in the universe wanted to hurt him. David smiled slightly. Turns out, if you raise something with kindness instead of fear, it tends to be kind rather than fearful. Wrath accessed the Academy's current problem files with 2 hands while keeping the other 2 focused on David. Interspecies Cooperation 101 had a 73% failure rate. Students from predator species couldn't work with prey species. Territorial conflicts erupted weekly. The previous instructor had resigned after a Vornt student and a Silas student nearly killed each other during a group project. The position you applied for has very specific requirements, Wrath said. Students from 12 different species, all struggling with biological incompatibilities and cultural prejudices. The curriculum requires demonstrated expertise in conflict resolution, interspecies psychology, and educational methodology. Your credentials show none of these. My credentials show 3 years of teaching a genetically modified dragon to trust instead of destroy, David replied. Every single day was a lesson in communication across impossible barriers. Ash doesn't speak any language. I don't have scales or wings. We found ways to understand each other anyway. Understanding a single creature is not equivalent to managing a classroom of diverse, sapient beings. No, it's harder, David said. Sapient beings can reason, can choose to bridge differences. Ash and I build our entire relationship on instinct and patience. If I could do that with someone the galaxy calls a monster, imagine what I could do with students who actually want to learn. Wrath felt something uncomfortable twisting through multiple thought chambers. This human spoke with the confidence of someone who had already succeeded at the impossible. No bravado, no false promises, just simple acknowledgement of what he had accomplished. The consortium has strict policies about approved teaching methodologies, Wrath tried again. Your approach would violate most of them. Then maybe the consortium's policies need revision, David said quietly. How many students fail your cooperation course every term? How many leave here still believing their species is superior or inferior to others? How many graduate with credentials, but without any real understanding of how to work together? The accuracy of those questions made Wrath's grip tighten on the armrests. 73% failure rate. Student conflicts requiring security intervention multiple times per week. Graduates who return to their homeworlds and reinforce the same prejudices the Academy supposedly existed to overcome. You're proposing to fix systemic educational problems with what friendship? Wrath's tone carried skepticism across all three vocal chambers. I'm proposing to teach that friendship is the foundation everything else builds on, David replied. Cooperation doesn't start with protocols and procedures. It starts with seeing someone different from yourself and choosing to care anyway. Before Wrath could respond, alarms shrieked through the interview room. Emergency lights strobed red. The holo display switched automatically to security feeds showing Corridor 7 students trapped. A malfunctioning security drone, weapons charging, and in the middle of it all, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move, a dragon protecting children it had never met before. Ash, David breathed, already standing. Wait, Wrath commanded, but the human was already moving toward the door. He sensed they were in danger, David called back. That's what I've been trying to explain. It's not about training or control. It's about connection. Wrath followed, compound eyes fixed on the security feed where the impossible was happening. The dragon had positioned itself between the students and the malfunctioning drone, wings spread as a shield, absorbing energy blasts that should have killed the children huddled behind it. Maybe, Wrath thought while running through corridors designed for careful walking, some lessons couldn't be taught with approved methodologies. Corridor 7 looked like a combat zone. Scorch marks blackened the walls where energy blasts had gone wide. 3 Quilvan students pressed against one corner, their tentacles wrapped around each other in terror. 2 Horth students huddled nearby, their crystalline bodies dimmed with fear. A Mindra student floated inside their environmental suit, the gaseous form flickering with panic. Between them and the malfunctioning security drone stood Ash, wings spread wide enough to create a living barrier. Energy blasts hammered into those obsidian scales, dissipating in patterns of light that looked almost beautiful if you ignored the deadly purpose behind them. The drone's targeting system had clearly glitched during what should have been a routine safety drill. Its mechanical voice repeated the same phrase over and over. Unauthorized intruders detected. Lethal force authorized in 15 seconds. Comply or be eliminated. Wrath arrived just behind David, breathing hard through spiracles not designed for running. The blast doors had sealed automatically, trapping the students and preventing security teams from reaching them. Standard protocol for contamination scenarios. Completely useless for a drone malfunction. Override code 77 Alpha. Wrath gasped into the comm system. Emergency shutdown of all security drones in Corridor 7. Override rejected, the computer replied. Drone operating under autonomous threat assessment protocols. Manual intervention required. David didn't wait for authorization. He stepped around Wrath and walked straight toward the drone, hands visible but not raised in surrender. More like someone approaching a frightened animal. David, stop, Wrath commanded. The drone will classify you as a threat. Already classified, David replied, not slowing. But it's focused on the students. I need to redirect its attention. The drone swiveled toward David, weapons recalibrating. Additional unauthorized intruder detected. Updating threat assessment. Ash's head turned slightly, copper eyes tracking David's movement. The dragon made a low sound, something between a growl and a question. David didn't look directly at him, but made a small hand gesture, fingers spread, then closing. Wait. Trust me. Wrath watched in disbelief as the dragon settled lower, maintaining the protective barrier, but not advancing. No verbal command, no control mechanism. Just understanding between 2 beings who had learned to communicate beyond words. Drone, David called out. I'm David Reed, civilian contractor here, for faculty interview. Authorization code should be in your system. No authorization found. You are classified as hostile intruder. Surrender or be eliminated. Not surrendering, David said calmly. He moved to the left, drawing the drone's targeting sensors away from the students. But I am questioning your threat assessment. You're about to kill 6 students who belong in this facility. That's not protecting the academy. That's destroying it. Intruders detected in restricted corridor during lockdown protocols. The drone responded. Standard security response initiated. David kept moving, slowly circling. Ash's wings adjusted position, always keeping the students covered while tracking David's progress. The dragon and the human moved like dancers who had practiced this routine 1,000 times. The students aren't intruders, David continued. Check their biosignatures against enrollment records. Cross-reference with class schedules. You'll find they're supposed to be here. Systems malfunction detected, the drone admitted. Unable to access enrollment database. Proceeding with threat elimination based on visual identification. Rat's mandibles clicked rapidly. A complete system failure. The drone couldn't tell students from intruders, couldn't access the very databases that should prevent exactly this kind of catastrophe. In another few seconds, it would fire on David, and once he fell, nothing would stop it from targeting the students again. Except Ash. David made another hand gesture, this one sharp and quick. The dragon moved with precision that defied its size. Wings snapped forward, creating a gust of wind that knocked the drone off its stabilizers. Not destroyed, just off balance for crucial seconds. David rushed forward, jumped, and grabbed onto the drone's undercarriage. His fingers found the manual maintenance panel, the one required by consortium safety regulations that nobody thought would ever be needed. Mechanical override, David grunted, yanking the panel open. Every automated system has to have one. Basic engineering. The drone spun, trying to shake him off. Energy weapons couldn't fire at something attached to its own body without destroying itself. It banked hard into the wall instead, trying to crush David against reinforced plating. Ash roared. Not the sound of a predator, but something deeper. Wrath felt it vibrate through the floor, through the walls, through every bone in an insectoid body and not designed to process such frequencies. The students cried out, covering their auditory organs, but the drone stopped. Just for a moment. Some deep-programmed survival instinct recognized the sound of an apex predator and froze. David used that moment. His fingers found the power coupling, twisted hard, and pulled. The drone systems shut down mid-flight, dropping toward the floor in dead weight. David jumped clear, rolled, came up in a crouch. The drone hit the ground with a crash that echoed through the corridor. Sparks flew from ruptured circuits. Silence fell, broken only by the sound of students breathing too fast and Ash's steady rumbling growl. "Everyone okay?" David asked, standing slowly. The Quilvan student named Prill unwrapped tentacles from the others and slithered forward cautiously. "The monster saved us." "Ash isn't a monster," David said, walking over to the dragon. He placed one hand on those massive scales, a gesture of reassurance and pride. "Monsters are made by how they're treated, not by what they are." Prill moved closer, curiosity overcoming fear. "But it's a Scarnath. We learned about them in xenobiology. They're classified as extinction-level threats." "So are hurricanes," David replied. "So are volcanoes. So are a lot of natural forces. Being dangerous doesn't make something evil. It just makes it powerful. What matters is how that power gets used." The other students crept forward, drawn by fascination stronger than fear. The Horth students' crystalline bodies brightened slightly, their version of excited interest. The Mindra student floated closer, their gaseous form pulsing with something that might have been wonder. "Can we touch it?" One of the Horth students asked. David looked at Ash. The dragon lowered its massive head, bringing those copper eyes level with the students. Steam rose from its nostrils in steady rhythm. Breathing. Waiting. "Go ahead," David said, "but move slowly. Ask permission first." Prill extended one tentacle, moving carefully. "May I?" Ash's eyes focused on the Quilvan student. Then, deliberately, the dragon shifted its head closer. Prill's tentacle touched obsidian scales, recoiled, then touched again with more confidence. It's warm, Prill said with wonder. I thought predators would be cold. Another thing your xenobiology class got wrong, David said gently. Lots of classes get lots of things wrong when they teach fear instead of understanding. The other students joined in, touching scales and wings with the careful reverence of people encountering something impossible made real. Ash remained perfectly still, patient as stone, letting them explore. Wrath watched from the corridor entrance, her arms hanging loose in posture that indicated complete uncertainty. The security team had finally arrived, weapons ready, faces showing confusion at the scene before them. Stand down, Wrath ordered quietly. The situation is contained. But Principal, the Scarnath, saved 6 students from a malfunctioning drone, Wrath interrupted. While we were trapped behind blast doors following proper protocols. The security chief's expression cycled through several emotions before settling on reluctant acceptance. What are your orders? Wrath looked at David, at Ash, at students who moments ago had been terrified and were now laughing as the dragon's tail curled gently around them like a protective barrier. Escort Mr. Reed and his companion to faculty quarters, Wrath said, and schedule a full academy assembly for tomorrow morning. I believe we need to discuss what education really means. David's faculty quarters were designed for a species with 6 limbs and 3 times his body mass. The sleeping platform sat too high off the floor. The atmospheric controls were set to a humidity level that made his clothes stick to his skin, and the lighting spectrum gave everything a purple tint that hurt his eyes. After a few minutes, he adjusted what he could and ignored the rest. Ash curled up in the corner that received the most warmth from the environmental systems, head resting on folded wings, eyes half closed, but tracking every movement David made. Probationary position, David said aloud, reading the official notification that had appeared on his personal display. 2 weeks to prove my methods work. Failure results in immediate termination and removal from academy grounds. Ash made a questioning sound, somewhere between a chirp and a growl. Yeah, I know. Not exactly a vote of confidence. David scrolled through the rest of the message. But Wrath's giving us a chance. That's more than most administrators would do after the day we've had. The door chimed. David opened it to find Prill hovering in the corridor, tentacles coiled nervously. Mr. Reed? I hope I'm not disturbing you. Just David is fine. And no, you're not disturbing anything. He stepped aside. Want to come in? Prill slithered through the doorway, eyes widening at the sight of Ash. The dragon raised his head slightly, acknowledged the student with a slow blink, then settled back down. I wanted to thank you, Prill said, for today. In the corridor, most teachers would have waited for security. Security was locked out by their own protocols, David replied. Sometimes waiting for the proper response means people get hurt unnecessarily, but you put yourself in danger. For students you don't even know. David sat on the edge of the too-high sleeping platform, legs dangling. That's what teachers do, or should do anyway. Can I ask you something? Prill's tentacles uncurled slightly. Of course. Why are you here? At this academy, I mean. What made you want to study interspecies cooperation? The question seemed to catch Prill off guard. Tentacles flickered through a pattern that David's limited xenobiology knowledge recognized as uncertainty. I'm supposed to say because the Quilvan government believes in building galactic unity, Prill said slowly. That's the official answer. But honestly, I'm here because back home, we're taught that other species are threats to be managed, not people to understand. I wanted to see if that was true. And what have you found? That fear makes terrible education. Prill moved closer to Ash, who watched with patient copper eyes. We spend so much time learning about differences that we never study similarities. About what makes species dangerous instead of what makes them worth knowing. David smiled. You're going to do well in my class. You're really going to teach interspecies cooperation? Starting tomorrow, if Principal Wrath approves the final paperwork. David's expression grew serious. Fair warning, though. My methods aren't traditional. I don't follow approved curriculums or standard protocols. I teach what works, even when it looks chaotic, to people used to order. Good, Prill said firmly. Traditional methods gave us a 73% failure rate. Maybe chaos is exactly what we need. The next morning, David stood outside classroom 7 while students filed in with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. 12 different species, all required to take this course, none of them happy about it. A Vornt student took a seat in the far corner, predator eyes tracking everyone who entered. Across the room, a Silith student positioned herself as far from the Vornt as possible, prey instinct screaming danger with every breath. The two had nearly killed each other last term. Their presence together now was testimony to the Academy's desperate need for solutions. Wrath observed from the back of the room, all four arms crossed in a posture David had learned meant skeptical attention. David entered last. Without Ash, the students' confusion was immediate and obvious. They had all heard about the dragon, had seen security footage, had spread rumors through every communication channel available. They expected spectacle. Instead, they got a human in plain clothes carrying nothing but a data pad. "My name is David Reed," he began, sitting on the edge of the instructor's desk instead of standing behind it. "I'm your new interspecies cooperation instructor. Before we start, I need to be honest with you. I'm not qualified for this position by any standard the consortium recognizes. I have no teaching credentials, no formal education in xenopsychology, and until yesterday, I never set foot in an educational facility like this one." The Vornt student's ears flattened. "Then why are we wasting time with you?" "Because I've spent the last 3 years learning to cooperate with someone the entire galaxy calls a monster." David met the Vornt's gaze steadily. "And if I can build friendship with a Skarnath, you can learn to work with the Silith student sitting across from you." "That's different," the Vornt protested. "She's prey. I am predative. Our species have killed each other for thousands of years." "So have mine and Ash's," David replied. "Longer than your species have had space flight. But we found common ground anyway. Want to know how?" The classroom fell silent. Even the students who had been whispering to each other stopped. "I stopped seeing him as a category," David said. "Not a Skarnath, not a predator, not a threat assessment. Just Ash, an individual trying to survive in a universe that wanted him dead before he even hatched. Once I saw him that way, everything else became possible." "You're saying we should ignore our biology?" the Silith student asked. "Pretend our instincts don't exist?" "I'm saying your instincts are information, not commands." David stood, walking among the desks. "Yes, you're wired to fear predators. Yes, you're wired to hunt prey. But you're also sapient beings capable of rational thought. You can acknowledge the fear and choose not to be controlled by it." A Horth student raised one crystalline limb. "Easy to say when you're not the one at risk. Vornt students have actually attacked Silith students here. That's not theoretical danger." "You're right," David acknowledged. "And that's why we're going to address it directly. No pretending the danger doesn't exist. No forcing cooperation through rules and regulations. We're going to build trust the hard way." He pulled up a hollow display showing the class schedule, then deleted it. "Approved curriculum requires 16 weeks of theoretical study before any practical application," David said. "We're going to do the opposite. Your homework for tonight is simple. Find one student in this room you've been avoiding. Learn their name. Learn why they're here. That's it." The student stared at him like he'd spoken in an unknown language. "That's not homework," someone protested. "That's just talking." "Exactly," David said. "Because before you can cooperate with someone, you have to see them as someone worth cooperating with. Not a species, not a biological category. A person." Wrath's mandibles clicked from the back of the room. David couldn't tell if it was approval or concern. "What about exams?" another student asked. "Skill assessments? The things that actually matter for grades. Those will come," David assured them. "But they'll measure different skills than you're used to. I don't care if you can recite xenobiology facts or cite consortium protocols. I care if you can work with someone different from yourself when it actually matters." The door opened. Ash walked in, moving with careful precision through furniture designed for smaller species. Students gasped, pressed back in their seats, reached for emergency alerts. "This is Ash," David said calmly. "He's going to be part of this class. Not as a threat, not as a teaching tool, as a student, same as you." Dragons can't be students, the Vornt said flatly. They're not sapient. Ash's copper eyes fixed on the Vornt student. Then, deliberately, the dragon moved to an empty space near the wall and settled down, head resting on crossed forelegs in perfect mimicry of attentive student posture. He understands more than you think, David said. And he's going to teach you more than I ever could about what cooperation really means. 2 weeks changed everything and nothing. The academy's hallways still looked the same, still processed the same atmospheric mixtures, still maintained the same temperature zones. But the students moving through them were different. Prill ate lunch with a Horth student, discussing temper mechanics while sharing food neither species could actually digest, but appreciated anyway. The Vornt and Silith students who had nearly killed each other last term were working on a joint thesis about predator-prey dynamics in modern society. Small groups formed across species barriers, studying together in ways that made Wrath's administrative reports look like documentation of miracles. David's classroom had become the unofficial gathering place during free periods. Students brought projects there, asked questions there, stayed after class not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Ash usually occupied the corner near the window, serving as both guardian and conversation piece for students who had stopped seeing him as dangerous and started seeing him as the most patient listener on the station. Then the consortium inspection team arrived. High Arbiter Kellen came aboard with an escort of security personnel and a reputation that made even Wrath nervous. The architects were the species that had designed most consortium protocols, had written the regulations that governed interstellar education, had decided which species qualified as civilized and which did not. Kellen stood in Wrath's office, all 7 meters of crystalline authority radiating disapproval through multiple light spectrums. "You allowed a human to teach," Kellen said. The architect's voice came from vibrations in their structure, translated by systems that struggled to capture the undertones, and permitted a Skarnath to remain on educational grounds. "These are not minor violations, Principal Wrath. The humans' methods have produced results," Wrath replied, trying to keep all 4 hands steady. Student performance increased 40% across all metrics. Interspecies conflicts dropped to 0. Collaborative projects, results do not justify endangerment. Kellen's light patterns shifted to harsh red. "I have reviewed security footage. The creature you call Ash has free movement throughout this facility. It has contact with students. Any incident would result in casualties the consortium cannot accept. There have been no incidents. Yet." Kellen moved to the window overlooking the main courtyard where students gathered between classes. "Statistical probability suggests violence is inevitable. Skarnath biology demands predatory behavior. The humans' claims of control are unsupported by scientific evidence." Wrath watched David in the courtyard below, sitting on a bench with Ash beside him while students clustered around asking questions. The dragon's tail curled protectively around a group of smaller species students who were using it as a backrest while studying. "I have issued formal termination orders," Kellen continued. "The human will be removed from Academy grounds within 24 hours. The Skarnath will be transferred to consortium custody for proper containment and study." "Study." Wrath's mandibles clicked sharply. "You mean dissection?" "The creature represents unique research opportunities. Its survival this long suggests genetic modifications that require investigation. Ash is not research material." The word surprised Wrath even as they emerged. "He's a student here, part of this community." Kellen's light patterns flickered to something that might have been amusement. "You become compromised, Principal. Emotional attachment to an inappropriate educational experiment. This is precisely why protocols exist, to prevent sentiment from overriding safety." The office door chimed. Wrath granted access, expecting security. Instead, Prill entered, followed by a steady stream of students representing every species in the academy. They filled the office, packed the hallway outside, their faces showing determination that transcended biological differences. "High Arbiter," Prill said formally, "we request permission to address the consortium's termination orders." "Students have no standing in administrative decisions," Kellen replied. Return to your classes. With respect, this decision affects our education directly. Prill moved forward, tentacles steady despite obvious nervousness. We have prepared documentation supporting Mr. Reed's continued employment. A Horth student activated a hollow display showing comprehensive data analysis. Academic performance across all departments increased an average of 40% since David began teaching. Student satisfaction surveys reached highest recorded levels. Mental health assessments show marked improvement in stress management and social integration. Collaboration between previously hostile species groups increased by 300%, added the Scylla student who had once tried to kill the Vornt now standing beside her. Projects completed successfully, 23 this term compared to 3 last term. Kellen's structure hummed with irritation. Numbers are irrelevant when weighed against safety concerns. Then consider this number, the Vornt student said. 0. That's how many incidents have occurred since Ash arrived. 0 attacks, 0 injuries, 0 conflicts requiring security intervention. Compare that to the 15 incidents per week we averaged before. Temporary statistical anomaly, Kellen dismissed. Skarnath aggression is inevitable. You're wrong. Prill's voice carried conviction that made even Kellen pause. Ash protected us when the security drone malfunctioned. He could have escaped, could have saved himself, but he stayed and shielded students he barely knew. That's not aggression. That's exactly what we're supposed to learn in cooperation classes. More students stepped forward, each sharing experiences that painted a picture Wrath had been watching develop, but hadn't fully appreciated until seeing it documented. Students who had been failing were now excelling. Species that had avoided each other for generations were forming genuine friendships. The academy had transformed from a place where cooperation was mandatory to a place where it happened naturally. This is emotional manipulation, Kellen said. You've been conditioned to accept danger as normal. We've been taught to see past danger to possibility, corrected a Mindra student. That's different. Kellen's light patterns shifted through several colors before settling on harsh white. The decision stands. The human and creature will be removed. This meeting is concluded. The students didn't move. They stood together, species mixing in ways that would have been impossible a month ago, united in purpose that transcended individual interests. Then we strike, Prill said quietly. No classes, no cooperation with consortium protocols, no participation in any academy functions until David and Ash are reinstated. You cannot strike, Kellen said. Students have no authority for collective action. Check your own regulations, the Horth student replied. Article 7, Section 12. Students maintain right to peaceful protest regarding educational policies that directly affect their learning environment. This qualifies. Wrath felt something shift in the office. Not physical movement, but a change in the balance of power that protocols and authority structures couldn't quite capture. The students had learned David's lessons well. They had found common ground, built something stronger than fear, and were now defending it with the same determination Ash had shown protecting them from the malfunctioning drone. You would sacrifice your education for a human and a monster. Kellen asked, David taught us that monsters are made by how they're treated, not by what they are. Prill replied. The only monsters here are the systems that judge potential by categories instead of actions. Silence filled the office. Kellen's light patterns cycled through colors that suggested complex processing. Finally, they settled on dim blue. I will grant extension, Kellen said. 1 term, quarterly reviews, comprehensive monitoring, immediate shutdown at first sign of incidents. But understand this clearly. Any violence, any failure to maintain standards in both human and creature will be removed permanently. Agreed, Wrath said before anyone else could speak. We'll exceed your standards. See that you do. Kellen moved toward the door, students parting reluctantly. This experiment of yours may prove interesting or disastrous. Time will reveal which. When the consortium team departed, the students erupted in celebration. Tentacles wrapped around crystalline limbs, predator species embraced prey species, and through it all, Wrath watched with growing certainty that something fundamental had changed. David appeared in the doorway, Ash's massive head visible behind him. "Heard there was some excitement," David said. "Your students just taught me more about courage than 30 cycles of administration," Wrath replied. "Welcome to permanent faculty, Mr. Reed." 3 months later, the academy looked nothing like the institution Wrath had run for 30 cycles. The changes weren't architectural. The same corridors still wound through the station. The same atmosphere processors still hummed their constant adjustments. The same temperature zones still shifted with mathematical precision. But everything else had transformed. Students gathered in mixed-species groups without prompting, sharing study spaces and conversation with the ease of people who had forgotten why they once stayed separate. The cafeteria that had been rigidly segregated by biological requirements now featured tables where species mixed freely, trading foods they couldn't eat, but appreciated for the gesture of sharing. Wrath found David in the observation deck, watching Ash perform evening flight practice outside the station. The dragon moved through space with grace that defied physics, wings catching solar radiation and converting it to propulsion through method scientists still didn't fully understand. "I brought tea," Wrath said, offering a container specifically mixed for human consumption. "Or what your species calls tea. Still uncertain if I prepared it correctly." David accepted it with a smile. "The fact that you tried means more than getting it perfect." He took a sip, winced slightly, then took another. "Though for future reference, less heat. Humans prefer their beverages warm, not scalding." Noted. Wrath settled into the observation deck seating, designed for species 3 times larger but comfortable enough. "I wanted to discuss your curriculum expansion proposal. Already got complaints from traditional faculty." David asked. "Actually requests. 5 other instructors want to observe your methods. 2 are considering adopting similar approaches." Wrath's mandibles clicked in what David had learned was amusement. The consortium's quarterly review showed results they classified as statistically improbable. "They're sending researchers to study how you achieve them, by not treating students like data points." David watched Ash loop through a complicated aerial maneuver. "Every traditional approach focuses on managing differences. I just taught them that differences are worth celebrating instead of controlling." A soft chime indicated incoming communication. Wrath accepted it, and a hollow display materialized, showing a species neither of them recognized. For legs, 8 eyes arranged in a circular pattern, bioluminescent patterns across what might have been skin or might have been fur. "This is the Academy of Advanced Species," Wrath said formally. "How may we assist you?" "I am Coordinator Vess of the Luminari," the being replied. "We recently achieved interstellar capability and wish to apply for student admission. However, consortium preliminary assessment classified us as too primitive for institutional acceptance." David stood, moving closer to the hollow display. "What makes them say you're too primitive?" "Our biology is incompatible with standard atmospheric systems. Our communication methods don't translate well to consortium standard. Our cultural development doesn't match approved progression models." Vess's bioluminescence flickered in patterns that suggested resignation. "We were told to develop further and reapply in 50 cycles." Wrath felt familiar conflict rising. Consortium protocols were clear. Species needed to meet specific benchmarks before integration into educational systems. The standards existed for good reasons, protecting both the species and existing students from incompatibilities that could prove dangerous. Then Wrath looked at David, at the human who by all official standards shouldn't be teaching here, and remembered a dragon that shouldn't exist anywhere near students. "Send us your biological requirements," Wrath said, "and your cultural information packets. We'll review them and provide response within 1 cycle. But the consortium classification is advisory, not absolute," Wrath interrupted. "This academy maintains autonomy in admissions decisions. We'll make our own assessment." When the communication ended, David was grinning. "You just completely ignored consortium recommendations. I learned from the best." Wrath pulled up Vess's preliminary files. "Though I should mention, modifying atmospheric systems for a new species will cost more than our discretionary budget allows. So we fundraise. Get current students involved. Make it a community project. David scrolled through the luminaries' biological data. Their bioluminescence is actually fascinating. Could create incredible opportunities for students studying light-based communication. Rats' compound eyes track the data with growing interest. You see teaching opportunities where consortium sees complications. That's because consortium protocols measure problems. I measure potential.